Hello, fellow Americans. My name is Mr. Steffler, and I am about to read Nationalism and Sectionalism. The main idea: patriotic pride united the states, but tension between the North and South emerged. Why it matters now: the tension led to the Civil War, and regional differences can still be found in the United States today. One American story. In the early 1800s, as you have read, the North began to industrialize and the South relied more heavily on growing cotton. At the same time, a rising sense of nationalism pulled the people from different regions together. Nationalism is a feeling of pride, loyalty, and protectiveness towards the country. The War of 1812 sent a wave of nationalist feelings through the United States. Representative Henry Clay of Kentucky was a strong nationalist. After the war, President James Madison suggested Clay's plan to strengthen the country and unify its different regions. Every nation should anxiously endeavor to establish its absolute independence and consequently be able to feed and clothe and defend itself. If it rely upon foreign supply, it may be cut off. It cannot be independent. Henry Clay, The Annals of America. In this section, you will learn about how nationalism affected the economic growth and foreign policy. You'll also see how Americans were beginning to be torn apart with the interests of their own region and those of the country as a whole. Nationalism unites the country. In 1815, President Madison presented a plan to Congress for making the United States economically self-sufficient. In other words, the country would prosper and grow by itself without foreign products or foreign markets. The plan, which Henry Clay promoted as the American system, included three main actions. Number one, establish a protective tariff, a tax on imported goods that protected the nation's businesses from foreign competition. Congress passed the tariff in 1816. It made European goods more expensive and encouraged Americans to buy cheaper American-made products. 2. Establish a national bank that would promote a single currency, making it easier. Most regional banks issued their own currency. In 1816, Congress set up the Second Bank of the United States. 3. Improve the country's transportation systems, which were important for a strong economy. Poor roads made transportation slow and costly. Roads and canals link cities. Representative John C. Calhoun of South Carolina also called for a better transportation system. Let it bind the Republic together with a perfect system of roads and canals, he declared in 1817. Earlier in 1806, Congress had funded a road from Cumberland, Maryland to Wheeling, Virginia. In 1841, the national road, designed as the country's main east-to-west route, had extended to Vandalia, Illinois. Water transportation improved too, with the building of canals. In fact, the period of 1825 to 1850 is also called the Age of Canals. Completed in 1825, the massive Erie Canal created a water route between New York City and Buffalo, New York. The canal opened the upper Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes region to settlement and trade. It also fueled nationalism by unifying these two sections of the country. The Erie Canal allowed farm products from the Great Lakes region to flow east and the people and manufactured goods from the east to flow west. Trade stimulated by the canal helped New York City become the nation's largest city. Between 1820 and 1830, its population swelled from less than 125,000 to more than 200,000. Around the 1830s, the nation began to use steam-powered trains for transportation. In 1830, only 30 miles of track existed in the United States, but by 1850, the number had climbed to 9,000 miles. Improvements in rail travel led to the decline of the use of canals. The era of good feelings. As the nationalist feeling spread, people slowly drifted away from their loyalty to state governments and toward the federal government. Democratic Republican James Monroe won the presidency in 1816 with a large majority of electoral votes. The Federalist Party provided little opposition to Monroe, who soon and soon disappeared. Political differences gave way to one Boston newspaper called the Era of Good Feelings. During the Monroe administration, several landmark Supreme Court decisions promoted national unity by strengthening the federal government. For example, McClintock versus Maryland, the state of Maryland wanted to tax the Bank of the United States. If the tax were allowed, the states could claim to have power over the federal government. The court upheld the federal authority by ruling that the state could not tax the national bank. The states have no power by taxation or otherwise to retard, impede, burden, or in any manner control the operation of constitutional laws enacted by Congress. That's Chief Justice John Marshall in McClintock versus Maryland, 1819. Another court decision that strengthened the federal government was Gibbons versus Ogden. The steamship operators fought over shipping rights on the Hudson River in New York and New Jersey. The court ruled that interstate commerce could be regulated only by the federal government and not by the state governments. The Supreme Court under John Marshall clearly stated important powers of the federal government. A stronger federal government reflected a growing nationalist spirit. Settling national boundaries. The nationalist spirit also made the U.S. leaders want to define and expand the country's borders. To do this, they had to reach agreements with Britain and Spain. Two agreements were improved relations between the United States and Britain. The Rush-Bagot Agreement limited each side's naval forces on the Great Lakes. In the Convention of 1818, the two countries set the 49th parallel as the United States-Canadian border as far west as the Rocky Mountains. But the U.S. relations with Spain were tense. Two nations disagreed on the boundaries of Louisiana and the ownership of West Florida. Meanwhile, pirates and runaway slaves used Spanish-held East Florida as a refuge. In addition, the Seminoles in East Florida raided white settlements in Georgia to reclaim lost lands. In 1817, President Monroe ordered Andrew Jackson to stop the Seminole raids, but not to confront the Spanish. Jackson followed the Seminoles into the Spanish territory and then claimed the Floridas for the United States. Monroe ordered Jackson to withdraw but gave Spain a choice. It could either police the Floridas or turn them over to the United States. In the Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819, Spain handed Florida to the United States and gave up its claims to the Western Oregon country. The map above shows the boundaries drawn and the territories gained in 1818 to 1819. Sectional tensions increase. At the same time, nationalism was unifying the country. Sectionalism was threatening to drive the country apart. Sectionalism is the loyalty to the interests of your own region or section of the country rather than the nation as a whole. Economic changes had created some divisions within the states. As you have read, white Southerners had relied more on cotton and slavery. In the Northeast, wealth was based on manufacturing and trade. In the West, settlers wanted cheap land and good transportation. These interests of the sections were often in conflict. Sectionalism became a major issue when Missouri applied for statehood in 1817. People living in Missouri wanted to allow slavery in their state. At the same time, the United States had consisted of 11 slave states and 11 free states. Adding Missouri as a slave state would upset the balance of power in Congress. The question of Missouri soon divided the nation. The Missouri Compromise. For months, the nation argued over admitting Missouri as a slave state or a free state. Debate raged in Congress over the proposal James Talmadge of New York made to ban slavery in Missouri. Angry Southerners claimed that the Constitution did not give Congress the power to ban slavery. They ordered that free states could go They worried that free states could from form a majority in Congress and ban slavery altogether. Representative Thomas Cobb of Georgia expressed the Southern point of view as he responded to the Talmadge Amendment. If you persist, the Union will be dissolved. You have kindled a fire which all the waters of the ocean can't put out, which seas of blood can only extinguish. Thomas Cobb. Quoted from Henry Clay, Statesman for the Union. Meanwhile, Maine, which had been part of Massachusetts, also wanted statehood. Henry Clay, the Speaker of the House, saw a chance for a compromise. He suggested that Missouri be admitted as a slave state and Maine as a free state. Congress passed the plan known as the Missouri Compromise. In 1820, it kept the balance of power in the Senate between the slave states and the free states. It also called for slavery to be banned in the Louisiana Territory north of the 3630 line, Missouri's southern border. Thomas Jefferson, nearly 80 years old and living quietly in Virginia, was troubled by the Missouri Compromise. Worried that sectionalism would destroy the country, Jefferson wrote that in the gloomiest moment of the Revolutionary War, I never had any apprehension equal to what I feel from this source. The Monroe Doctrine. The nation felt threatened not only by sectionalism but by events in the Americas. In Latin America, several countries had successfully fought for independence from Spain and Portugal. So some European monarchies planned to help Spain and Portugal regain their colonies, hoping it would keep the urge to revolt from reaching Europe. U.S. leaders feared that if this happened, their own government would be in danger. Russian colonies in the Pacific Northwest were also concerns to the Americans. Russians had entered Alaska in 1784, and by 1812 their trading posts had reached almost to San Francisco. In 1823, President Monroe issued a statement that became known as the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine said that the Americas were closed to further colonization. He also warned that European efforts to reestablish the colonies would be considered dangerous to our peace and safety. Finally, he promised that the United States would stay out of European affairs. The Monroe Doctrine showed that the United States saw itself as a world power and a protector of Latin America. In Chapter 12, you will learn about the new democratic spirit and how Native Americans suffered during the presidency of Andrew Jackson. Thank you.